Okay, well, welcome back, everybody. Before we get to our next presentation, this next presentation rather will be about how to market yourself and how to really promote yourself and your abilities. So this presenter will be talking about, once again, marketing yourself, your resume writing skills. And now I'd like to welcome Paula Golladay from the IRS.
Hello. Hello, everybody. How is everyone doing today? I recognize several faces. I knew I'd probably see some folks here I knew. It's nice to see you. We're going to be talking about a lot of things today, and I want to warn you that I hate using PowerPoints because I don't like being chained to the clicker and having to click through slides, so please bear with me as I do this today. Okay, so first of all, I wanted to give you guys a little bit of information. Who knows the unemployment numbers, the statistics that are out there currently, or the percentage? Who knows the current percentage of unemployment? The general American population between the ages of 16 to 64 has a 5.2 unemployment rate, 5.2% unemployment rate. So that's pretty astounding. Now remember, it was at 8% and it's now at 5.2%. But wait a minute. Tell me, can any of you, the number of people with a disability and the percentage of that group that's unemployed? Not 50%, no. It's 11.6%. Now, that's the same comparison of age group. So that age group of 18 to 64. So now tell me how many people are working in average America. It's 69%. 69% of the population is employed. So when you look at those numbers, how many of the people with disabilities are working? How many people with disabilities are employed? 19%. Pretty astounding, right? 19%. And what percentage of people are underemployed, not working at their top potential? It's between 22 and 25% of the population is underemployed. Yikes, right? So we know now how you can improve your potential for getting a job. And I'm assuming you're all here because you want a job, right? And most people have work now, but they also want to climb the career ladder. Or they're bored at their current job and they want something new. And it's not what their passion is. So what do we do with this information? So we know work is our way of attaining money. And I work at the IRS, and the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, manages our income because we all pay our taxes on tax day. And I'll say this as a caveat, please pay your taxes, but I've said it once and we can move on with the presentation. But I'm a Schedule A program manager, as many of you know. Now Schedule A is for people with disabilities to be able to get into the job sector without competing. Now, the expectation is that you're qualified. You still have to have the competencies required for the job. You have to have the knowledge and skills, and you still have to be the best possible candidate. Now, for how to write a resume. That's what we're here for. I'm not going to read through my slides, but who can tell me which of the federal bullets, I'm sorry, whether the federal resume requires bullets or paragraph forms? Do you know whether they prefer one or the other? It's actually paragraph forms. The reason for this is because bullet points tells the HR person reading your resume that you don't have writing skills and you've got nothing to offer. It doesn't give them any information. If you say, I manage an IT program, what does that mean? What does that tell someone? IT, what do you mean by IT program? What is that? You need to write clearly about all of the information that you have. For example, don't just write your position description that you previously did or that you're currently doing. I already know the position description you're applying for. I want to know what it is that you do and what you've already done. I want to make sure you can satisfy the requirements on my PD. And then second, we need to know, who are you? A lot of resumes I get don't even have a name on them. So what do you want me to do? Guess? Or there's a name, but no indication of where I can get in touch with them, how I can get in touch with them, by phone, by email. There's no information to contact the person. And then often, what they're doing, what their objective is, why they're applying for the job. And often I don't see where the person lives or where they want to work. That's left off of the resume. So if you live in Texas, but you really want to move to California for a job, tell me that. And then when? When do you want to start the job? Is it a best fit for you next year or maybe now? What's your intention in terms of time? I need to know that. And then how to get the resume. There are several different ways to do it, how to disperse your resume. You can meet someone in person, give them a hard copy. That will give them an opportunity to read it on the spot, or you can send it to them electronically. A lot of people do send me their resumes electronically. Now, I can tell you that a lot of the federal government wants it electronically. And the reason for that is because I'm responsible then to send the resume to potential managers, and I can't send a hard copy to each manager. And they're often positioned all over the country, so I need to be able to send it to them electronically. Like I work in DC, but I have contacts all throughout the country within the IRS, so I can't be flying and hand delivering copies of people's resume to them. So that's one issue. And now this may seem like a joke, but I'll proceed anyways. The subject line often is interesting. I've received emails before, and my top 5 favorite subject lines are as follows. These are pretty funny, so get ready. RE: and that's it. RE: that's a subject. Or nothing, just a blank line. Or got a job. And I would say, yeah, I have a job, thank you. Or job, just job. So my top favorite, and I challenge you all to beat this one. Are you ready for this one? Yo, recruiter. Yeah. How many people think that when a recruiter were to open an email that they want to see something that says, yo, recruiter? Nobody wants to see that. And then the next would be, please, 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 don't use text language, like abbreviations, you, BTW for by the way. Please don't do that. Again, remember, I represent the manager, and you want the manager to know that you're a professional person, and you always use formal language, not BTW, you are. Those abbreviations you use in text are not appropriate. And I don't expect it to be perfect English, of course. I understand English is a challenge, but please use formal language. Okay, so back to the resume. So first, obviously, when you're emailing somebody, tell them where you live, tell them what you're interested in, and you can list where you've worked. Let's say you worked here in DC, and that's been your work experience. But you could have worked in DC, Maryland, Virginia, maybe North Carolina. List where you've worked. And then the next thing, the first job that you're doing, the most current job you're doing right now, the one you're in at this moment that you're applying. Tell me who you work for, the agency, whether it's a private sector company, and what your title or your job role is there. Now, most people will leave this blank. This part I think is very important. How many hours they work. Now, 40 hours could be full-time or part-time. So it could be 40 hours full-time or part-time. So you need to tell me how many hours weekly you're working. And the reason for this is, let's say that you work at a private company, and the federal government will use information like that to figure out the years, that amount of work you've done to match you into a GS level. And they'll position you based on your work experience. So if a private company, your experience had thus and thus specific time there, you might match a specific grade level when you get into the federal government. And we want to make sure that we position you correctly. And if you've worked for one company for 2 years, but you've only worked 5 hours a week, that's not going to equate to the same type of position working full-time elsewhere. So that's why we need to know how many hours you've worked. Now, USA Jobs Online requires the hours to be put in. So we follow that standard. Now, as I just described, what you're supposed to do, you can write an objective. That's something you can determine yourself if it's a good fit for you. But if you're giving me your resume, I have to assume that you're looking for a job, right? You're not just going to give me your resume because you have nothing else to do and it's what you do for fun. I'm assuming you want a job and you're giving it to me with the intent of looking for a job. But I would prefer you to write something brief about what you like to do, your skills, what kind of job you're looking for, your passion. If you led a project, I would like to know that kind of information. If you were the team lead, or if you use specific statistics, I need to see that information. Let's say you want to work in finance. I did have one resume that I worked with previously where the person told me that they were a stockbroker and that they managed $2 trillion of stocks, which is impressive, but that was all. There was no information about how they managed that money, that $2 trillion. So my question was, how many years have you been doing this to have that ability to manage that kind of money? And how many people are you managing to be able to do that? And they wouldn't give me that information. So guess what? They're not going to get hired. Now, if you work in IT, if you tell me that you run software, what does that give me? What software? If you're working with hardware, IT hardware, are you working on a server? Are you working on databases? Are you setting up databases? I don't know. I can't make assumptions. And if you're HR, that's a very, very wide field to work in. HR could involve a lot of different work. What do you do specifically? EEO, qualifications. What specifically do you do? Do you do retirement benefits? Never allow the manager to make assumptions or to have to guess. Because if they guess, they could guess wrong. And then you're stuck in whatever assumption they make about you. So let's say you're working one job more than 10 years. And you feel like you're satisfied by it, but you don't need to list everything out you do. So let's say you've worked at your agency like me, for example. I work at the IRS. I've worked there, let's say, for 10 years. I would not list out every year's experience and all the years past. That's just not necessary. So generally, the idea is your list should include the 10 years of experience, but cumulatively. Nothing before that. That information before the 10 years is old. You've advanced since that time, and you have more skills and information that is new and applicable to the today. And especially in the technology field. Technology has changed so much in the past 10 years that, too, needs to be up to date. Now, I told you I don't like PowerPoint, so you can take a look at this, but I'll move on to the next. Now, when you compare these two types of approaches to writing on a resume, the first is very brief, just kind of 1 or 2 lines. Technical project management, methodologies, you know, what does that mean? It's nice. It's official wording. And then below it, you see the longer paragraph. And that's where I get a better idea. Oh, this tells me what I need to know. I understand now. I have a better understanding of my abilities, and I can understand these abilities to recommend them to the appropriate manager, me as the recruiter. So which one am I going to prefer? Who's a manager in here? Anybody in here a manager? Raise your hands. No managers? 1? Oh, I knew there'd be 1. Okay. Well, let's say you were managers, or you were going to become managers. Congratulations, you're a manager. Which would you prefer to read on a resume of these 2 examples? The top one or the second one? The second one, am I right? Thank you. Yes, you're right. Because now you know who the person is, you know what their skills are, what their potential is, what their capabilities are, and how they're going to match your needs. The bottom line is, you need to ask yourself, it's not can you do the job, will you do the job? That's what you need to ask yourself. And honestly, if you're qualified, if you're the best qualified, and I see your resume, the top 3 or 4 people, they know they can. And we, the managers, know they can. But will they? And I know that most people at that 1-year minimum, they'll work very hard. They're on 1-year probation. 1-year probation. They'll work very hard, and then they'll tell me in day 1 of the 2nd year, they'll sit back in my office and start doing nothing, and tell the managers to go away. And that's not going to work. That person will not do the job. We want to recommend people who will do the job and who have a passion for it. There's 2 reasons to work. 1, your life box. Eating dog food is not a good idea. Your life box requires food and housing. And dog food doesn't taste wonderful. And living in a doghouse is insufficient. The second reason is the passion, because you care so much about what you do. Now, it doesn't matter if you're not passionate about exactly what you're doing in your current workplace. Just don't do it. Find a job you're passionate about. Look for a position that suits you. And if it's not one you have now, what do? There's options. First, begin to write your resume. Who has a resume in here? Who already has a resume? A current resume. Okay, great. You're stars. The others, too bad. Sorry, I'm just kidding. But you need to have a resume ready at all times, because you never know what could happen in life. Let's say one day you're just curious and you're looking at USA Jobs, and you happen to find something that's exactly the job you would want. But it has a closing time that's coming up in just, let's say, 2 hours. So if you took that time to write your resume, that's pretty last minute. And I'll tell you honestly, it's junk. A resume written that quickly is junk. Because it's too haphazard. You'll put in whatever you think is necessary just to get the resume in on time. But it's junk. So please, keep your resumes updated regularly. Add important information. Now, if you got a new assignment at your job, or a new detail appointment, or whatever, include that information on your resume and keep it up to date. And I don't even care if you wrote a paper about on a napkin. Put that into your computer as soon as you can. Or if you have yellow Post-it notes all over your office to keep yourself up to date. You can never remember everything, so note-taking is a good idea. It's impossible to remember everything. And then develop your secondary skills. What are secondary skills? Now, I know there's several IT people in here today. A couple HR folks, finance people, whatever your primary job is. That's great. That's wonderful. But what do you do next? Because you know what? There are many people out there that also have your skills. So what are you going to bring to the table, so to speak? What makes you unique? Why are you important to a potential employer? Why would a manager be hiring you over someone else? Because if I have two top candidates in the finance field and I'm comparing them side by side and they're both great, who am I going to pick? I'll tell you, one person I'll pick, and let's say they told me a whole lot of stuff about they can offer me additional finance skills. Like, yes, I'm a finance person, but I also have contracting experience. I can write contracts, federal contracts. Or maybe they've taken training before on procurement. They have procurement experience, something like that. They're unique as opposed to the other person. They have the same position description, they have the same amount of experience, and they're both wonderful candidates, but the person who has those unique skills is going to stand out to me. And we can take training as well in our current positions. Now remember, your life experiences are also training in and of themselves. So who volunteers? Who here volunteers? Nobody volunteers? Nothing? Okay, all right. Well, if you volunteer, that's something you can add to your resume. If you were a finance person in that field, and let's say you were a finance major, but you were also the treasurer of a college organization when you were in school. That's a good match of your skills, right? That's going to be part of your field someday. You can put that down on your resume. Or let's say if you run a database for your outside organization, maybe a church or temple organization. So if it's an important thing like that, it's going to be very interesting for someone to read. Nobody wants to hire a boring person or a boring individual. And to be honest with you, you don't want to work with boring people. You want to be the one person that's unique. Let me give you an example. If you go to the store and you want to buy a TV, you know how much money it's going to cost, you have the money, and so you look at your options of the different TVs and you compare them as you're shopping at the store. Now, if they're all pretty similar prices, which one are you going to choose? I'll tell you right now, the one that most people choose has the most bells and whistles. It's the fanciest one with the most capabilities. The shiny one. That's the one people usually pick. That's how people make comparisons. And this is also applicable to the job world. If you show up at a job interview unenthusiastic and you get kind of lost in the shuffle, no one's going to remember you. But if you show up to a job interview enthusiastic, excited to meet them, excited to explain to them what you can do, which person do you think they're going to hire? The docile, quiet person or the person who's positive and energetic and enthusiastic? That doesn't mean you need to be jumping up and down and, excited excessively, but you need to show motivation and enthusiasm for being there. I'm going to move on to the next slide.
All right, so how many pages should be on your resume? That's the big question. How many pages? Now, if you just graduated and you have no work experience, 1 page. Just 1. If you've been working for 10 years and you give me a 1-page resume, I'm going to think, what have you been doing? I mean, for the last 10 years, what have you done? Have you just been sitting back with your feet on the desk? So please, a 2nd or 3rd page can be appropriate depending on what you've been doing. Depends on really how much technical involvement there is with your job. So the idea of a 1-page resume, that's completely gone. Kicked to the curb. Okay? Now, I know most of you have been working at least several years, so please, give me a 2- or 3-page resume. So, of course, you want the job you're doing currently on top, and then you're going to list the remaining in descending order. Rather, please put your education at the top of the first page. I don't want to be reading through every page of your resume and finally see your education level at the end. If you're applying for a job that requires a specific level of education, like for example, Cynthia had mentioned before, a previous presenter, that for one position you needed the accounting credential. So if I get a resume that requires that and I have to read through a few pages, I think, okay, well, this is wonderful, but where's your credential? Where's your certification? And I can't hire you because you don't have it. So again, you want your name, your address, your contact information, and then your education, whether it's a bachelor's or a master's, whatever you have. Now, of course, not all jobs require a level of education. So if you feel maybe apprehensive and you think, oh, my education level isn't high enough, that's all right. It just depends on which position you're applying for. So after your education, list your job positions that you've held. And at the bottom, anything special. Maybe if you've received awards, whether they're monetary or just recognition, list those. I mean, let's say, you've been an amazing, very popular person and you have a whole laundry list of recognition. Please don't include all of it. Just pick a few of your best moments. And you'll have plenty of time to discuss everything else in your interview. Again, if you have volunteer work experience, that's something you can add as well. Do you have any students in the audience? None. Okay, no students here. Well, if you know a student, you can recommend that they add their senior class project. And that can be part of their work experience. Most senior projects are internships. And that's something they can add at the end of the year when they graduate. That's important. Now, another really interesting thing, but what I'm going to say that you shouldn't add, is what you've done on your family vacations. And yes, I've seen that on resumes. I have. Honest to God. I'm not kidding. I have gotten resumes that have this whole list. Okay, so on my family vacation, we went to Colorado, we went to the mountains, and that's great, wonderful. Why didn't you invite me? But we don't want that on your resume. I don't need to know about your dog or your cats. And yes, again, I have gotten those resumes. So please, don't just copy and paste. If you just copy and paste and borrow from a previous resume and use it for a new resume, from one resume to another, please pay attention to the font. As well as the color. So if you have someone that has just all black text and then suddenly there's one line in blue on the resume, I'm going to wonder, okay, where did this line come from? So pay attention. Make sure that your font and your color are the same throughout the document. Make sure that it's left justified. I get quite a few resumes that are centered, and all the text is centered on the whole page. So there's all these misaligned gaps on the left side of the page, and there's plenty of white space. That's not something we want to see. Use paper wisely. So imagine you have an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. And that's your, let's say that's your foundation, what you're going to be building on. Now, if there's a ton of blank space, I mean, that's a missed opportunity to be adding more information. You could add some wonderful things about yourself in those white spaces. Now, of course, you have to be able to write clearly and explain what you're doing because you have to get your resume through before you get the interview. And if you're not qualified, well, then you're not going to get invited for an interview, right? I mean, you can't just knock on the door and say, okay, can I have my interview for the job now? I'm ready for the interview. You have to be qualified, and you have to show that. Now, who has recently applied to a job on USA Jobs? Anybody here? Let's see some hands. Did you notice the long list of questions you had to answer? Okay, I'm going to warn you about one thing. If you answer those questions incorrectly, you are immediately disqualified. So, make sure that you answer clearly and carefully. Read the questions. If the question asks, can you do all of these things? You should not answer, and you answer you can't, you'll be disqualified. If there's 3 options, just pick one, okay? Okay, so I've just received a 5-minute warning, so I'm going to go ahead and open up for questions from the audience now. Any questions from anybody? Right here up front, in the middle. Go ahead, ma'am.
My question's about education. Sometimes it's hard to reflect that on a resume because I went to a residential school for the deaf. How do you reflect those experiences on a resume? I'm repeating my question. If my educational background was at a residential school for the deaf, should I put that on my resume?
Yes. Yes. I mean, you know, where you've worked and where you were educated, of course. It doesn't matter where you were educated. That's important. Okay, and the green? Yes, you. That's green, right? Oh, gray. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Hi there. It's really interesting that you remarked today about resume building. And I'm a workplace recruitment program person myself. And I get resumes passed over my desk often from a variety of different people. And I'll go back to the universities and give them feedback that their academic advisors need to be helping those students develop those resumes, because we really need more feedback from people like you. And there's a lot of different jobs out there that require different kinds of resumes as well, particular to the job. And I think that's also important to be emphasized to people filling out resumes. I'm a lawyer myself. And my profession is very different and it has very different requirements. So I think it's important to emphasize and keep that in mind, that the resume needs to be specific to a person's job. And I'd really like to encourage us to share that feedback with people, helping people develop resumes.
I mean, really, you should have a general resume as well as a specific one, at the minimum. So yes, I agree. And you know, I've been all over, and that's the feedback I've received, yes. Next, back there. Sir?
Good morning. I actually have 2 questions. My first question is, when you're writing a resume, and you mentioned to do it in paragraph form, do you write it in first person or third person?
First person. I can do all of these things.
And what's your opinion of a cover letter?
It's really up to you. I mean, not all jobs require them, so you don't always have to include one. It's really up to you in the position. Just, when you write your bio, that should be in third person, though. That's different. But with your resume, use first person. Is it the last question? Last question? Okay, one more question.
I'm wondering, with resumes, when people submit them, often the government doesn't always respond timely to a resume submission. Now, is it appropriate for a deaf individual to contact the agency and ask them for feedback why they haven't been selected for the position that they applied for?
That's a good point. Okay. So one of my biggest problems that I hear from people, one of the biggest complaints, is that they reach out to all these different agencies and they never respond. And that just irritates me to no end because I respond. I mean, that's my job, or part of my job. So I think, how awful for a person to not respond to your resume. I mean, if it's me, yes, I will respond. For other people, I can't speak for them. I mean, maybe they don't have people to do it, or what they're doing is wrong. I can't speak for them. But what I would suggest is you could send with an agency, okay, one agency that is called the 2 line, and the other, so put one agency in the 2 line and another in the blind carbon copy, the BCC line. I mean, of course, you don't want to tell the world that you're contacting all these people and let them all know. Okay? Okay. Alrighty, back to Ryan. Ryan did tell me to shut up, so.
Oh, I didn't say it that way. I said it much nicer, right. I'm pretty sure.
Well, so I will shut up. Thank you all very much.
Well, we want to thank Paula for being here today and presenting to us. We're going to